The first time Daniel Whitmore noticed Sarah wasn't there, he was irritated. The second day, he was annoyed. By the third day, he felt something he couldn't explain: fear. Sarah had worked in Daniel's mansion for 6 years. She had never missed a single day. Not when storms flooded the streets. Not when she had a fever. Not even the day her old phone broke and she had no way to call. She always showed up. Always quiet. Always respectful. Always invisible. And suddenly she was gone. Daniel Whitmore was a self-made millionaire in his early 40s, the kind of man business magazines called ruthless but brilliant. He owned real estate across the city, chaired meetings that decided the fate of companies, and negotiated deals worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. His life ran on discipline and precision. He expected the same from everyone around him, especially from employees. On the third morning of her absence, Daniel called his house manager, Margaret. "Why hasn't Sarah reported to work?" he asked sharply. Margaret hesitated. "She hasn't answered her phone, sir." Daniel frowned. That wasn't like her. Sarah was many things: shy, quiet, hardworking, but irresponsible wasn't one of them. "She lives nearby, doesn't she?" Daniel asked. "Yes, sir, in the old Maplewood district." Daniel glanced at his watch. He had a board meeting in 2 hours. A multi-million-dollar contract depended on it. Yet something tugged at him, a small, stubborn voice he hadn't heard in years. "Cancel my morning meetings," he said. Margaret blinked. "Sir, I'll handle this." The drive to Maplewood was only 15 minutes, but it felt like entering another world. The paved streets of Daniel's neighborhood slowly gave way to cracked sidewalks, peeling paint, and small houses pressed tightly together like they were holding each other up. Daniel had never been to Sarah's home. He had never asked. He parked in front of a narrow, weathered house with chipped blue paint. The front gate hung crookedly. The lawn was nothing but patches of dry dirt. He stepped out of his sleek black car, drawing curious stares from neighbors. For the first time in years, Daniel felt out of place. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. After a moment, he heard slow footsteps from inside. The door creaked open. It was Sarah. A little boy, maybe 8 years old, stood there. His blonde hair was messy. His face was pale. "Can I help you?" the boy asked weakly. Daniel cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Sarah. I'm her employer." The boy's eyes widened slightly. "You're Mr. Whitmore." Daniel nodded. The boy hesitated before opening the door wider. "Mama can't get up." Daniel stepped inside, and what he saw stole the air from his lungs. The house was nearly empty. No television, no decorations. A small couch with torn fabric, a kitchen table with only 2 chairs. On the counter sat medicine bottles and unpaid bills stacked in a neat pile. In the corner of the living room, on a thin mattress placed directly on the floor, lay Sarah. She looked nothing like the neat, composed woman who cleaned his home every day. Her face was pale. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She tried to sit up when she saw him, but winced in pain. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I meant to call." Daniel felt something twist painfully in his chest. "What happened?" he asked, his voice no longer sharp, just quiet. Before she could answer, the little boy spoke. "Mama fainted at the grocery store 3 days ago. The doctor said her kidneys aren't working right." Daniel's heart pounded. Sarah looked embarrassed. "It's just temporary. I didn't want to bother you. I'll be back to work soon." "You can barely sit up," Daniel said. She forced a small smile. "I can manage." Daniel looked around again. The unpaid bills, the empty refrigerator he glimpsed when the boy opened it to grab water, the medicine labels. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel asked. Sarah looked down at her hands. "You pay me for work, sir, not for my problems." That sentence hit him harder than any business loss ever had. Daniel had spent years believing he was fair. He paid on time. He didn't shout. He gave Christmas bonuses, but he had never asked about her life, never asked if she was struggling, never wondered how someone earning minimum wage survived in a city where rent rose every year. "How long have you been sick?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "A few months." "And you kept working?" She nodded. "Ethan needs school supplies and the rent." "Ethan?" The boy standing beside him. Daniel swallowed hard. "Where is his father?" he asked carefully. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "He passed away 2 years ago, construction accident." Silence filled the small room. Daniel thought of his own childhood, growing up in a cramped apartment with a widowed mother who worked double shifts to feed him. He remembered the shame of worn-out shoes, the fear of eviction notices, the nights his mother pretended she wasn't hungry so he could eat more. Somewhere along the way, he had buried those memories under success and wealth. Now they stood in front of him again, in the form of Sarah and Ethan. "What do the doctors say?" Daniel asked. "They say I need treatment, dialysis, maybe surgery later." She looked away. "It's expensive." "How expensive?" She stayed silent. Ethan answered, "A lot." Daniel felt anger rise, not at her, but at himself. He had spent more on his last watch than what this family probably needed to survive. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked softly. Sarah's voice trembled. "Because dignity is the only thing I have left, sir." That broke him. Right there in that tiny living room, Daniel Whitmore, the man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, felt his eyes burn. "You have more than dignity," he said firmly. "You have value." Over the next hour, Daniel made phone calls. He contacted a private hospital. He arranged immediate treatment. He spoke to a specialist. He paid the overdue rent anonymously. He transferred enough money to cover months of expenses. When Sarah realized what he was doing, she began to cry. "I can't accept this," she said weakly. "Yes, you can," Daniel replied. "Not as charity, as gratitude." "For what?" "For reminding me who I used to be." The following weeks were not easy. Sarah's treatment was painful. There were complications. Ethan struggled in school, worried constantly about his mother. Daniel visited often, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting quietly while Ethan did homework. For the first time in years, Daniel began leaving the office earlier. He started asking his employees how they were, really asking. He established a health support fund for all his staff. No one would have to choose between working sick and feeding their child again. One evening, months later, Sarah stood at Daniel's front door, not as his maid, but as a guest. She looked healthier, stronger. Ethan stood proudly beside her, holding a small homemade cake. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. Daniel smiled. "You already did." She shook her head. "No, you didn't just save my life. You gave my son his mother back." Ethan stepped forward. "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Daniel knelt down and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Be better than me," he said gently. Because the truth was, Daniel hadn't just gone to Maplewood to check on an employee. He had gone there to complain. Instead, he found a mirror reflecting the man he once was, and the man he had forgotten to be. Sometimes, the greatest wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or properties. Sometimes, it's measured in compassion. Daniel Whitmore thought he was going to confront a careless maid. Instead, he found courage, dignity, and a second chance to become human again. And that discovery broke his heart, only so it could finally heal.